This was my first trip to Armenia, and I bought my ticket just 2 days before departure. I hadn't done any research at all. No routes, no places to visit, no plans. The only thing I booked was a hotel. I wanted to test one simple idea. Could AI become my travel assistant in a country I knew absolutely nothing about? My journey turned out to be quite long. I first flew to Gyumri, then traveled to Yerevan. From Yerevan, I flew to Istanbul, then to Antalya, and from Antalya I headed to Kemer, but Turkey will be the subject of my next video. Today, I want to tell you about my experience in Armenia. My first stop was Gyumri. Before my flight, I asked AI to suggest the best ways to get to Yerevan. It recommended taking a minibus, and the fare turned out to be exactly what it predicted, $4. By the time I arrived in Yerevan, it was already late. I checked into my hotel and went straight to bed. The next day, I finally went out to explore the city. Once again, I asked AI to recommend places based on my personal preferences. I wanted something active somewhere I could climb, hike, or explore instead of just walking around looking at buildings. It suggested visiting the Cascade Complex. I counted 555 steps all the way to the top. Once you make it up, you're rewarded with an incredible view over the entire city. And if the weather is clear, you can even see Mount Ararat in the distance. After reaching the cascade, I decided to keep climbing even higher until I reached the very top of the hill. Then something unexpected happened. I was walking around, sharing my thoughts with the camera, when suddenly I spotted what looked like either a snake or maybe some kind of eel. Honestly, I still have no idea what it was. It was just this long, slimy creature that looked way too much like a snake. To be honest, I enjoy places like this much more than crowded tourist spots. Mountains, rocks, places where you actually have to climb, that's exactly my kind of adventure. This, however, wasn't exactly what I was hoping to run into. You may notice that a lot of this video is recorded as voiceover. The truth is, during the first few days, I felt a little uncomfortable pulling out my camera and talking to it in public. It honestly felt awkward at first, and I was pretty nervous filming myself around so many people. While walking around the city, I noticed lots of people offering guided tours. I talked to one guide, then another, then a third. But instead of booking anything right away, I went back to my hotel room and asked AI what it thought. AI suggested several options. At first, I thought about taking a taxi and visiting everything on my own, so I wouldn't depend on anyone else's schedule. But then it suggested something interesting. It said that joining a group tour might actually be the better choice because traveling alone could get a little boring. In a group, there would be plenty of other travelers, and maybe I'd even meet people with similar interests. I stopped for a second and realized it actually made sense. Climbing mountains and exploring nature is usually much more fun with other people than completely alone. So I trusted the recommendation and booked the tour. Our first destination was Lake Sevan. The place had an amazing atmosphere. At first, I was worried that we wouldn't have enough time at each location. I thought the guides would keep rushing everyone along and I wouldn't get a chance to really explore anything, but it turned out to be the complete opposite. We arrived at Lake Sevan, surrounded by mountains and beautiful scenery. I started climbing uphill, then walked all the way to the farthest viewpoint without worrying about time at all. Everything was perfectly balanced. I could spend exactly as much time as I wanted at each spot without feeling rushed. When I reached the highest point, the view was absolutely incredible. The lake, the mountains, the sunlight reflecting off the water, it all looked stunning. After that, we continued to one of Armenia's most famous tourist destinations, Diligen. We walked around a bit, looked at the old streets, and then headed out for lunch. Honestly, I expected the tour to take us to some overpriced tourist restaurant where everything costs 2 or 3 times more than usual. But that wasn't the case at all. Instead, they brought us to a place where both tourists and locals come to eat, and the prices were completely reasonable. After lunch, we headed to our next destination. The drive took around an hour and a half, but it was definitely worth it. We arrived at Geghard Monastery, one of the most atmospheric places I visited during the trip. At first, I walked around the main area like everyone else, exploring the monastery and the surroundings. Then I noticed several small trails leading up into the mountains. There were almost no tourists there. In fact, once I got farther up, I didn't see anyone at all. Naturally, I couldn't resist. I started climbing. The higher I went, the better the views became. Eventually, I came back down, thinking I had already explored everything. But then I noticed another huge rocky hill rising above the area. It was probably around 50 meters higher, and there was almost nobody up there. The only thing I could see were a few small piles of stones near the top. My first thought was simple. If someone managed to climb up there before, then it must be possible. That was all the motivation I needed. I immediately started climbing. Of course, it wasn't an easy path, the trail wasn't perfect, but there were enough rocks and ledges to grab onto, so getting up wasn't too difficult. Eventually, I reached the highest point I could possibly get to. Beyond that, it would have required proper climbing equipment and a lot more experience. That was the absolute top. There was nowhere else to go. Looking down from there was an incredible feeling. The cars below looked tiny, almost like toys. And then I realized something. Climbing up had actually been easier than climbing back down. When you're going up, you're only looking ahead. But when you're descending, you finally notice just how high you've climbed, and that's when your heart starts racing a little. But that wasn't the end of the tour. After leaving Geghard, we headed to another incredible place called the Symphony of Stones. I honestly have no idea how nature created something like this. At first, I followed the regular tourist trail like everyone else. There's a well-maintained path that takes you through the main viewpoint. But after a while, I noticed another trail leading up the hillside. It wasn't developed at all. There were no signs, no fences, and no tourists heading that way. Of course, I couldn't just ignore it. So once again, I started climbing. From up there, the scenery looked completely different. The higher I got, the more impressive the views became. But for me, the best part wasn't even reaching the top. It was the climb itself. Finding your way up the rocks, discovering new viewpoints, and feeling completely surrounded by nature. That's what I enjoy the most. The whole place had an incredible atmosphere. I never expected this trip to be so physically active. By the end of the day, I had definitely worked up a sweat. Our final stop came just before sunset. It was another famous landmark, but as we were approaching, I noticed something even more beautiful. The sun was slowly disappearing behind the mountains, covering everything in warm golden light. The view was absolutely breathtaking. Instead of walking toward the main attraction with everyone else, I noticed a small path leading downhill. Without thinking twice, I decided to go there alone. Sometimes those little spontaneous decisions become the best memories of a trip. There was almost nobody around. It was quiet. Just the mountains, the sunset, and complete silence. It's one of those moments that's almost impossible to capture on camera. You really have to experience. Later, I asked AI to recommend a cafe that locals actually visit. I wanted somewhere affordable where I could try authentic Armenian food. The total came to just $4. Finally, I started thinking about the entire experiment. Could I have organized this trip completely on my own? Absolutely. Would it have taken much longer? Without a doubt, I would have had to spend hours searching through websites, reading reviews, comparing routes, checking maps, and trying to figure everything out myself. Instead, I simply asked one question and got an instant answer. Everything was in one place. which saved me a huge amount of time. Looking back, I think the experiment was a success. AI didn't replace the experience of traveling, but it became a genuinely useful travel assistant that helped me discover Armenia in a much easier and more enjoyable way.